Hey guys, Booligan here with Booligan Shooting Sports. Today, we're taking a look at another interesting Smith & Wesson from the early 1990s and late 1980s for that matter. This is a Smith & Wesson Model 622, and it is very, very strange. Not even just strange for its time, it's strange for today. It bears a passing resemblance to a Smith & Wesson second or third generation. Here's an example. Here's my model 5906. The general look and feel is pretty comparable. There are a lot of very, very big differences between those two models. The first one being this is a rimfire pistol. Now, they had a couple of different variants of these, different barrel lengths, different materials, different finishes, but this model 622 is the sort of mid-barrel length. They had a longer barrel. You could get a version with a shorter, more compact grip, but this is sort of the full grip, and it's like a 4.5-inch barrel length. It's chambered in .22 long rifle. We all know how I love my weird and wacky .22s. I have a lot of weird and wacky .22s. But this one is particularly interesting in that it has sort of an underbarrel configuration. The barrel, you'll notice, is located here instead of up here. So look at something normal like this 5906. Your barrel is at the top of the slide, like basically every other gun that's out there. But in this one, it's at the bottom of the slide. Why is that? For a couple of different benefits to that. First one is that you now have a low bore axis. Your bore axis is the relation of the bore to sort of your hand where that pivot point's going to be. And the higher that your bore axis is, so in this case, got a barrel way up here and the grip way down here, so your bore axis is about that much. That's going to impart more of a flipping motion when you fire. It's going to turn more of that recoil into rotational forces. This, your bore axis, your bore's right here, is basically a few millimeters above the top of your hand. So it means when you fire this, you're not going to get a lot of that muzzle flip. Now, this is a .22 long rifle pistol. You're not going to get a lot of muzzle flip anyways, but this certainly helps in making these models very, very smooth shooters. You see this same pattern of sort of underbarrel design in something like a Chiappa Rhino, the revolver which feeds from the bottom cylinder, and very, very strange designs, but they make for fairly decent shooters. Now, when you make that accommodation, weird things have to happen, especially on a semi-automatic pistol. Where do your spent casings normally eject on a pistol? On, again, something like a 5906, you've got a cutout here on the slide, and they come out the top. Well, in this one, they come out the grip, basically. The spent .22 casings eject out the side of the frame right about there. You can see when you pull it back, you've got this open ejection port here. It's very peculiar because normally you're used to seeing it come out of the slide. That makes it not particularly helpful for left-handed shooters. So a right-handed shooter, you're going to have your right finger here. Your right trigger finger is going to ride right underneath that. And your left hand is probably, if you're shooting with a good modern shooting grip, it's going to be here around this way. Well, if we do that left-handed, this is awkward for me because I'm not left-handed, and we put like a nice like stacked thumb approach here, yeah, your thumb is directly in the ejection path. That's unfortunate because otherwise this has one really good ambidextrous control on it, but for that big reason, it's not very good for lefties. Now, the weight of this is nothing. These are super ridiculously lightweight. As a comparison, this guy weighs about 1.5 pounds. So 24 ounces, if my math is serving me well. So yeah, about 1.5 pounds. This similar time frame model 5906 weighs 2.5 pounds. It weighs a full pound more. Now, the differences are because this guy is fully made out of stainless steel versus this, which has an alloy frame with a stainless steel slide and operating system. It's thicker, it's beefier because this is 9mm and this is 22. Obviously, this can be made lighter. But it's hard to stress just how slimline this is comparatively. Compare it to, let's see what miscellaneous things that I have here. So here's like a Ruger SR22. It's, other than the grips, like the slide and everything is way thinner on this model compared to something like my ridiculous Ruger Standard Mark series. This one obviously has a big fat body kit on it, but it's so much lighter and it's so much thinner. And that made these decent little kind of pack around guns, you know, something if you're working on a ranch or a farm and you want to have a 22. Light, easy to tuck into a holster. If you got one of the compact versions, they're actually fairly small and very handy pistols. You'll notice this one has a threaded barrel. That was not a factory option. They made these between, I want to say, like 1989 and 1996. Maybe 1988. But these are early 1990s pistols. You weren't exactly throwing a lot of suppressors on things back then. So I want to say EGW, I believe that's the company, makes a threaded barrel adapter for these. And threading them is actually really easy. Normally, these will have, go to my magic little bag of goodies that came with this. The barrel is kind of retained using a spring washer and this little guy here that threads in, and this is normally sort of your muzzle device. There's a clever tool that you use to remove it. You can buy a tool, or you can cut the edge off of a penny and use that as actually a fairly good tool to get in there and tighten that up. But in the modern times where we like to suppress our 22s, especially me, I love a good suppressed 22, you can get a threaded barrel adapter, again, from EGW. Now, that is one of the other big benefits to that underbarrel design. Normally, when you are suppressing a pistol, not so much with rimfire pistols, because usually rimfire suppressors are small, but when you're suppressing a pistol, you're going to need to have suppressor height sights. Well, that's not the case here, because when you throw a suppressor on it, the suppressor is barely right here. Unfortunately, my suppressor is in one of my other safes, so I don't have it in front of me. But I can include a picture at the end of this of what this looks suppressed. I also have a couple of pictures of this in a variety of configurations on my Instagram page, which you should really be following, because that's where I put out the most urgent information on my projects. So because of that reason, and because of the operating system here, these make very good suppressor hosts. They suppress very, very well. Your controls are very simple, except for one very, very weird thing. The controls, for lack of a better term, look a little janky. You just have like some stamped sheet metal things. It almost looks like something is missing here on the side. But no, these are your controls. You have a manual safety, flips up, simple. You also have a slide catch, a slide lock release lever, if you will. And then you just drop that and you're ready to shoot when you replace your magazine. There are no mirrored controls on the other side, because where would they go? Your ejection port is right there. So where's the magazine release? It's not this little guy here, almost looks like a heel one. There's not a button. It's right here. I kind of understand their thinking behind this. It's a very simple system. It's a very simple place to put it. But having the magazine release be directly in the middle of your grip, that really does require you to upset your shooting grip. So to eject the magazine, you have to pull your hand off the grip, or at least pull a finger, move some fingers down, move a finger there, and then eject your magazine. Showing that from the other side. So you kind of have to like move down and just somehow get to this button. The pros of that, well, you have an ambidextrous magazine release. That's fantastic. But as we discussed earlier, this doesn't lend itself particularly well to ambidextrous use. That's actually the person that I purchased this from locally was a left-handed shooter. He bought it because he's a Smith & Wesson collector, and then realized, wow, this gun is not going to work for me very well at all because I'm a left-handed shooter and it's just not for me. But yeah, it's just kind of interesting that that's where they chose to put the magazine release. It works. It gets the job done. Magazines. So when these initially launched, they came out with 10-round magazines. It is reported that later on there were 12-round magazines for them. My magazines will hold 11 rounds. There seems to be enough space to get a 12th round in there, but I can't get a 12th round in there on either one of these magazines. So it's just kind of interesting that, like, maybe these are 12-round magazines and they just haven't broken in enough, because this thing basically looks brand new for being 20 years old. But yeah, that 11-round magazine capacity is a little bit interesting. But as with most 22s, they're single stack, single feed, just a very basic, kind of pain in the butt to load because you got to slide down the little slider. But they work. These are relatively reliable guns, consistent firing. They get the job done. Let's kind of talk about the history of these and why they failed. So these came out in the, like I said, the late 1980s, early 1990s, and were competing against things like the Ruger Standard Series. I think Buckmarks were out at that time. But for whatever reason, these just really did not catch on that much. Maybe it is because of the fact that they aren't particularly good for left-handed shooters. Maybe it's just a little too weird for most people. But for whatever reason, you don't hear a lot about these where you hear a lot about the Ruger Mark series, which continues to this day, obviously, with the Ruger Mark IV. Takedown on these is pretty simple. You basically just, I don't know if I'm able to do it now, but you pull it back slightly and you pop this little guy off the top and that releases the recoil spring. Then you can pull it all out. It's just kind of weird when you pull the slide back because you're expecting to see a chamber right here and there's not. It's literally just a passage for this recoil mechanism and the weight of the slide to exist. It's just a very, very strange setup. And that's realistically why I got this. I got it so that I could design a couple parts for it. I got it to use as a suppressor host. I love my Amtac fire ant. I throw it on every 22 I can. I wanted to see if I could design some grip panels for this to do replaceable grip panels. And like I said, maybe it sort of has that kind of, retro futuristic look to it. The underbarrel design is unique. It almost has some sci-fi aspects to it. And obviously, I like my sci-fi looking guns. So it kind of makes perfect sense that I would try to turn this into something maybe a little bit more sci-fi. And I want to do it while keeping the base gun pretty much perfect and intact, because this one is a super clean model. It's a good shooter, and I want to keep it that way. So yeah, this was sort of a reference model for me, an interesting one to add to the collection to talk to you about the sort of history of, late 1980s, early 1990s Smith & Wesson rimfire guns, kind of adding it to my reference catalog for that, and to design some cool stuff for. So I hope you enjoy this tour of this Smith & Wesson Model 622. I know that I enjoy having it. We'll add it to a future range day so we can get out and see how well it does and shoot it suppressed as well, so you can see how that works. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.